So before I start this video, I just want to say two quick things. Number one, I know I need a haircut. I'm going to get one just prior to leaving for my summer house. And to the commenter in one of my prior videos, yes, I did clip my nails. Now that that's out of the way, a couple weeks ago, I think I mentioned that my iMac's hard drive had died. So what did I do? I went ahead and, excuse me, and put Linux on it, specifically Debian, I believe it was. And I say that because I've been distro hopping. I went from Debian to Zorin and stayed on Zorin for a while. Then I went to Linux Mint, and I've decided to settle with Fedora, specifically Fedora Silver Blue, because I wanted to prepare myself for the Steam Deck as much as I can. I've fallen in love with Flatpaks. It's just fantastic to be able to have everything in one place and separated from the main operating system. And for those of you who do not know, Fedora Silver Blue is a quote-unquote spin or version of Fedora that effectively locks you out from the main system, in that you can get in there if you want to, but by default, the main system is read-only. In other words, unless you really know what you're doing, you cannot alter the main system, and that's fantastic. I love that. The Steam Deck is the same way. SteamOS is also what they call an immutable operating system, which is, again, the operating system is read-only, and the applications, especially the Flatpaks. Now, I say that because on Fedora Silver Blue, you can also install applications as layered packages on top of the main operating system through a utility called RPMOS Tree. But generally speaking, the apps that you would find on FlatHub or in the Software Center, those are completely separated from the operating system. They are sandboxed. I just think that that's a fantastic approach. So that's why I settled on Fedora. Now, I will say that I could never get the Wi-Fi to work, but that's okay because I bought a cheap Wi-Fi extender and I'm using Ethernet with it. But I have to say that I'm extremely happy with Fedora, and I do think that for my old iMac, that's going to be the OS of choice. I also decided to try putting GNU Plus Linux on one of my old laptops. So I managed to get PCLinuxOS running with Wi-Fi on my old white MacBook, which is now about, let me think, 14 years old. Yeah, it's a 14-year-old system. I've got PCLinuxOS running on it, and I'm very happy with it. And what I also am thinking about doing is switching one of my family members over to Linux Mint. That's actually one of the reasons why I put Linux Mint on my iMac for such a short time. I wanted to try it, make sure that everything ran out of the box to the point where this particular family member would never have to touch the command line, because all they do is just basic Office stuff and web browsing, just your basic stuff. And I think that for that kind of computer user, Linux is honestly terrific nowadays. Now, back when I started, not so much. And even these days, if you have a Broadcom wireless card, you might still have problems. Like I said, PCLinuxOS was installed on my white MacBook for the simple reason that it was the only distro I could find that I've had prior experience with that that actually worked with the Broadcom wireless card out of the box. But the card on my relative's laptop is Intel, so aside from Wi-Fi and possible graphics issues, if all you're doing is your basic computing stuff, and let's say you're installing on a desktop that's connected via wired Ethernet, which is just the cable that goes into your that goes from your computer into either your modem or into the wall, then you're pretty much set. I'm serious, you're pretty much set. I would say either Zorin or Linux Mint would be perfect for somebody switching over from Windows. And I'm not just saying this, I'm not pulling words out of the air. This is from my own experience. I could not be happier. And I've also discovered things like Proton Mail, Proton Drive, BitRunner, I think, the password manager. So I'm discovering more things all the time I'm also looking at getting back into Python, so I've installed the Genie IDE, and I'm working with that along with Thonny. So one of my ultimate goals is to possibly take a Raspberry Pi and rebuild my Braille and Speak. I don't know yet how I'm going to do that, but it's something I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. Speaking of Pis, my computer at the computer at my summer house is going to be, for those of you who didn't see the video, a Raspberry Pi 400. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I did experiment a little bit with the Intel version of the operating system through a virtual machine. And unfortunately, it's stuck in 32-bit mode, so I couldn't really do much with it. But I've got a feel for it in the sense that it's based on Debian, so I already know my way around. This would be perfect for just a general purpose, cheap little computer. That way I don't have to take my laptop back and forth every summer, be able to travel with less. To me, Linux has definitely become a win-win. And on top of that, even my M1 MacBook Air will be able to run a Linux-based operating system because they're already working on it. But that program is still in the alpha stage, not quite ready. But I do think that by the time that little MacBook Air is no longer able to run Mac OS, I suspect the M1 version of Linux would be ready. This version of Linux for the M1 Air uses the KDE desktop environment. I want to say that I'm personally a GNOME, XFCE, not really LXDE because of how small everything is, but definitely XFCE and especially GNOME, because GNOME out of the box has everything that I need. Now, KDE does as well, but unless you know where to look, it's kind of hard to find. It's not really out in front where it should be. Like, for instance, the screen magnifier is not in accessibility. It's in desktop effects, which I find really strange. Something else to note is that at least in the virtual machines that I've tried, KDE has, especially on KDE Neon, has locked up unexpectedly a few times, and I mean completely locked up. And from what I understand, KDE Neon is a bleeding edge distribution, so I should probably try something else. But historically, KDE, at least for me, hasn't met my needs, which is a shame because I can tell you aesthetically I love it. If it's not going to be able to meet my needs as someone with a visual impairment, then you can understand why it's a bit frustrating. I do think that I might end up switching to Linux permanently in the long term. Just so much has been happening lately, I didn't know how else to bring an update for you guys. What do you think? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.